You know, for decades, the world has basically been waiting for China to collapse. This strange mix of communism and capitalism, it just shouldn't work. And yet, China hasn't just survived, it's grown at a speed the world has literally never seen before. So what's the secret? How does this massive system of control actually work? And why is it so resilient?
This quote really gets to the heart of it. We have to stop seeing China as this unsolvable puzzle and start seeing it for what it is: a map, a very deliberate blueprint for control where almost nothing is left to chance. And that's exactly what we're going to do in this explainer. We're going to trace that map to understand who's really holding the power, how the entire economy is directed, and how this system deals with the rest of the world.
And really, it all starts with the number one. I mean, think about this. China is physically wide enough to cover 5 international time zones, but officially it only has one, Beijing time. It's this powerful symbol for how the whole country is run, one time zone, all under one party, led by one leader. Everything, and I mean everything, flows from the center.
All right, so let's dig into that blueprint. We're going to start at the very top, with the absolute power at the center. Then, we'll look at how that power directs the entire economy. From there, we'll explore the tools they use to control over 1 billion people. And then, how China strategically deals with the outside world. And all of that will lead us to the big one. Is this system actually built to last?
So, let's start right at the top. Because to understand modern China, you absolutely have to grasp the total, unquestionable authority of the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP, and of course, its leader.
The country's own name in Mandarin, Zhongguo, gives us a massive clue. Now, it's often translated as Middle Kingdom, but it's really more than that. It implies being the central kingdom, the most important place, the literal center of the universe. And when that's your core national identity, it kind of feels natural that the leader of that center holds complete and total control.
After the CCP won the Civil War back in 1949, Chairman Mao ruled with an iron fist. His reign was so chaotic that after he died, the party actually created a 2-term limit specifically to stop another dictator from ever taking power. But that all changed in 2018. Xi Jinping, after securing his power base, got rid of those term limits, which effectively paved the way for him to rule for life. So, with that absolute political control completely locked in, how does the party use it? Well, they use it to direct the country's huge economic engine. The party decides what gets made, what gets built, and ultimately which industries are going to be chosen to win on the global stage.
In most Western economies, there's a pretty clear line between government and private business. In China, that line is intentionally, well, it's blurry. At the center of it all are what's called state-owned enterprises, or SOEs. These are companies directly controlled by the CCP. And while their share of the economy actually dipped for a while, under Xi Jinping, it has surged back to 60%, and it's still climbing. This gives the party just incredible economic leverage.
And they use a very specific playbook to make this happen. It's pretty much a 5-step process for global domination in any industry they choose. First, the party targets a strategic sector, let's say solar panels. Then, state-owned banks just flood those companies with cheap loans. Other state-owned companies give them sweet deals on materials and support. And with all those advantages, they can instantly undercut any global competitor on price. Before you know it, they dominate the entire market. And here's what that playbook looks like in the real world. A solar company in the US has to go to a private bank, convince them they're a good investment, and they'll probably pay a pretty high interest rate. A Chinese solar company, they get a loan because the state has declared it a national priority, often with an interest rate close to 0. It's not a level playing field. This isn't a free market. It's a state-directed mission.
Now, building up these dominant industries takes a huge mobile workforce. But in China, you can't just pack up your bags and move for a better job. The party's economic control goes hand in hand with its control over the people, where they're allowed to live, the jobs they can take, and even what they're allowed to think and say.
This control works through a system called hukou. The easiest way to think about it is like an internal passport. If you have a city's hukou, you are a full resident. You get access to good housing, schools, healthcare. If you don't, you're basically a migrant worker with limited rights, a second-class citizen. It's an unbelievably powerful tool for managing the population. It stops overcrowding in some cities while funneling millions of workers exactly where they're needed.
And if you want to see just how effective this is, just look at Shenzhen. In 1980, it was a little fishing village with about 30,000 people. Then the CCP called it a special economic zone. They eased the hukou rules and basically pointed the population in that direction. Today, it's a mega city of nearly 18 million people.
an entire metropolis built from scratch pretty much overnight, all by state directive. So the state controls where people can physically go. But what about where their minds can go? This shift to controlling information is just as crucial to the whole system. So let's try a simple test. What happens when someone inside China searches online for Tiananmen Square?
Well, the difference is it's night and day. Outside of China, you get the famous Tank Man photo. You see articles about the 1989 protests. Inside China, on their main search engine Baidu, you just get nice tourist photos. The entire historical event is simply gone. This is what's known as the Great Firewall in action, and it creates a state-approved reality for over 1 billion people.
And this control applies to everyone, even the most rich and powerful. Back in 2020, Jack Ma, the founder of Alibaba and China's richest man, gave a speech where he criticized the state banking system. In response, Xi Jinping personally crushed the IPO of his company, Ant Financial, which was about to be the biggest in world history. Then, Ma just vanished from public view for 3 months. The message to absolutely everyone was crystal clear. No one is above the party.
Okay, so let's zoom out. We've seen how the party controls things inside China, but how does it handle its relationship with the rest of the world? Well, the strategy is basically a modern Great Wall. You let in only what you absolutely need, like technology and money, and you keep everything else out, especially foreign ideas and influence.
I mean, this data is just stark. In the United States, over 15% of the population is foreign-born. In China, it's a tiny, tiny fraction of 1%. This is not an accident. The country is intentionally and deeply inward-looking because foreign ideas are seen as a direct threat to the stability the CCP has worked so hard to maintain.
But the party is smart. It knows it can't be completely cut off. It needs foreign technology to get ahead. So it uses this really clever strategy, known as the catfish effect. The analogy is pretty simple. You drop a hungry catfish, a powerful foreign competitor, into a tank full of domestic sardines. To survive, the sardines are forced to swim faster, to innovate, and to get stronger, which in the end benefits the whole ecosystem.
And there is no better example of this than Tesla. In 2019, China rolled out the red carpet, giving Tesla all kinds of special privileges to build a factory in Shanghai. They weren't just being nice. Tesla was the catfish. Its presence forced the entire Chinese EV supply chain to rapidly innovate and get better. And now, just a few years later, that same supply chain is fueling a domestic EV industry that's starting to dominate the market. They let the catfish in, they learned everything they could, and now they're ready to take on the world. This kind of absolute top-down control, it isn't new. It's been tried by the Soviet Union, Imperial Japan, and a bunch of others. And every single time, it has failed spectacularly. So that brings us to the most important question of all. Can China's blueprint defy history? Is this system actually unbreakable? A key difference really comes down to what you could call a release valve. In a democracy, when social pressure builds up, say from a bad economy or social unrest, elections act as that release valve. People can vote the leaders out. But in China's system, there is no valve. The pressure just builds and builds and builds, which risks a massive break. This really explains the CCP's obsession with total control. It's the only way they know how to keep that pressure from ever hitting a breaking point. But a lot of experts will warn you that predicting China's collapse using our Western models is a big mistake. Leland Miller of China Beige Book is pretty blunt about it. That is not going to happen. And his reasoning? China's financial system just doesn't play by our rules. Their banks don't primarily run on risk and profit. They run on political directives from the party. When the government owns the banks, it can just order them to keep lending, no matter what. The fundamental rules of the game are just different. And so that's where we're left. A system of absolute control that has, without a doubt, achieved an economic miracle, lifting hundreds of millions of people out of poverty. But at the same time, it's a model that history tells us is pretty much doomed to fail. The ultimate question is whether China's unique mix of ancient culture, cutting-edge technology, and absolute state power is finally enough to break that historical pattern. Answering that, well, that's the defining geopolitical challenge of our time.